What's up guys, Jack here with MTS, and this is the Razz Pad, essentially a tablet shell for a Raspberry Pi. Let's talk about it. Now we gotta get something out of the way real quick. This thing costs $220 MSRP. Now they are having a Black Friday sale, you can find links down in the description below, but at $220 MSRP, well, plus the cost of a Raspberry Pi, plus the cost of an SD card, you are very quickly approaching iPad level pricing at the $330 mark with this guy. And if it came down to this versus an iPad, well, you're probably going to be doing a lot more with an iPad than you could do with something like this. And if what you care about is more of the, Raspberry Pi styled tablet on the wall stuff for home automation control, maybe some Home Assistant dashboards, well then you would probably be better off with the $40 Fire tablets. So this thing really is in a niche. But hey, if you fit that niche, well, this is pretty much the best all-around option for you. In terms of I/O, we have Ethernet, 3 USB 3 ports, full-size HDMI, a headphone jack, as well as the power jack, and that is a standard 12-volt DC wall adapter. Moving around to the other side, we have a battery indicator, volume up and down, as well as brightness. They can be configured, as well as your power button. We also have the micro SD card slot relocated here to the side, so we can swap out the SD card if we want to swap to a different distro, we need a bigger card, whatever you need, you have easy access to the micro SD card slot. Taking a look at the back, there are a few vent holes. One of them does have a fan, but there is one that is just all blocked off, and that's where the PCB lives on the inside of this thing. You also have a cutout at the top for you to extend your GPIO pins using a ribbon cable. Installation of the Pi was fairly straightforward. You basically just disassemble this thing with 5 screws with the included screwdriver that they give you, use 4 screws to mount up your Raspberry Pi, plug in all the included little cables, and you're off to the races. Now, I want to run Companion on this guy and have, my full-on web buttons here for using as a touchscreen production controller. Companion is a free piece of software that normally works with a Stream Deck to give you button control over, actual production equipment. It allows you to use your Stream Deck for professional use instead of just for really controlling stuff happening on your computer. But they also have a web buttons thing, which allows you to use just about any browser on the same network and control Companion that way. And I want to run that on this, because then I could also have a Stream Deck plugged into the side with one of the USB 3 ports and still have physical buttons. But sadly, the version of Companion that I'm running on this Pi right now doesn't actually have any user interface. It's all command line, and you manage it through a web browser on a different computer, whether it be a laptop or a desktop or your phone. But I want to get a build of that running on this guy with the touchscreen. But sadly, I haven't been able to get that working just yet. I'm gonna keep trying because this would be awesome to use for my professional use as well as for MTS Live. And speaking of using it as a controller, someplace where it's probably gonna be on a desk, this thing does sit at a pretty substantial angle. And that angle is dictated really by 3 things. 1, the angle for how it's gonna sit on a table. 2, the actual lithium-ion batteries, which are just a bunch of 18650 cells in here. They say that you can get about 5 hours, but I was only able to get about 3 hours running the Pi, and then I turned this thing all the way off, made sure it was off, and then when I went to pick it up in the morning, it was already dead, so don't know what's up with that battery life. But the third thing that dictates the height of this thing is the Pi itself in here, because you can't really just, hey, hack off the Ethernet jack and all that other stuff. Oh wait, you can. It's called the compute module. So I think it would be really cool if they made a version of this guy that was more in lines with what a tablet looked and felt like, more of an iPad-esque tablet that ran with the compute module, so you could make this guy even slimmer. Now, I'm not really too sure what you'd be doing with that, because again, that enters more of those tablet ranges where you'd actually be looking at a real tablet. And this guy, I think, strikes a good balance. It's still something that you would use a piece of testing or low-end hardware with, like a Raspberry Pi, but it's also one of those things where it's like you're probably using it with a Raspberry Pi you already have, rather than going out and buying a Pi, buying this whole thing, and then putting it all together. This feels more like an accessory for something if you need it, Or if you have kids and they really want to tinker around with this stuff, this thing would be awesome for them. But you do have those GPIO pins to work with still. So if you're using this guy to develop a touchscreen interface for a DIY project where you need, your GPIO pins still, if you need that, all these ports, if it's one of those things where it's like, you need it or you don't need it. And I just think this is really cool and I want to use it, so I'm gonna find a need for it. Now, I do have a few issues with this guy. The first one is not really an issue, but you can't use the PoE hat with the Pi. If you try and power this whole thing using PoE, if you have the hat and everything, you're gonna have a bad day. Just don't do it. Use the wall adapter. The second thing is that the power jack, for some reason, is near the bottom rather than this needs to be moved. This needs to be moved. A power jack near the bottom where, you might be holding this guy, well, I'm covering the power jack. So yeah, they need to move the power jack. And honestly, I would rather have all of the I/O on the back of this guy. I think that would be really cool. The third issue I have with this guy is that when I took my unit out of the box, the display glass was slightly protruding from, the side of this. So I just went down and pressed down all of the corners, and it hasn't popped back up since, but I don't know. And the fourth big issue that I have with this guy, and this is the biggest issue, is that the bezel here overlaps the actual display underneath it. So if you're running, a general GUI or something on it, you're probably not gonna have any issues. But if you're actually reading text and looking at a command line, well, the first few characters are gonna get cut off of every row, and you have to look at it kind of at an angle. A little bit annoying, but not a deal breaker. The fifth thing is, well, the display and the glass aren't laminated. So you do have a pretty substantial air gap between the actual glass that you're touching and the screen underneath it. Even with my issues, I still think that the Razz Pad is something worth buying. There's really nothing else like it. Sure, you can get the touchscreen and some of those kits and stuff that'll try and emulate a tablet, but with, having a built-in battery, your SD card, all your ports relocated, the touchscreen, the angle, all this stuff, this is a very compelling package. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and drop a like. If you really liked it and want to see more of me in your subscription feed, well, then you can go ahead and get subscribed. Again, I'll have links to where you can get the Razz Pad down in the description below. They are having a Black Friday sale, so act fast. But let me know down in the comments whether this is something that you would actually have some sort of use for. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.